How are you, New York City? It's election day if you live in New York. Remember to vote. Primary day, baby. It's also 117 degrees outside. It's also a day in which Yankee fans can complain about their offense doing nothing on the previous evening, and a day for Met fans to lick their wounds yet again. I want to discuss the Mets in a very weather-appropriate way. When you go to the beach, whether it's on Long Island or in New Jersey, before you go to the beach, there are warning flags that are on the beach. You know the warning flags?
Yes, for the riptides or, I don't know, some dangerous conditions out at sea.
Correct. So, like, for example, if there's a green banner, it's low hazard. It means there are calm conditions. Exercise with caution, but all good. Then you've got the yellow flag that says medium hazard, moderate surf and/or currents. And then you got the red one. The red one is high hazard, high surf, strong currents. And then they just close the damn ocean down, and you're not allowed. I'm looking at where we are in Metland, losing 9 out of 10. And I want to be fair in where I am in terms of my hazards as a New York Met fan. Because during the losing streak that they suffered at the hands of the Tampa Bay Rays and then the Atlanta Braves and then the opener against the Phillies, I was a low-hazard kind of guy. I was hey, it's the ebbs and flows of a baseball season. We got to calm the F down. But last night was the first night where my hazard flag moved up a notch. Now, am I at red high hazard? Not yet. Am I shutting the damn ocean down yet? Not yet. But I have to admit, as a Met fan who sat there melting at Citi Field, my hazard flag's been elevated to yellow. Because while, yes, this is the ebbs and flows of a baseball season, I am starting to see things that may not easily be fixed by a hot streak. And so I'm a little worried. And I'm not one, Teak. You've known me now for 2 years as a co-host. I'm not one to scream and yell and get worried after a bad streak. I like to use reason. I like to give thought. But I got to tell you, last night it was right in front of him. Juan Soto hits the big home run to get him back in the game. He comes up at another big opportunity. And even after he strikes out in the 8th inning, you got 4, 5, and 6 of the order again in the 9th inning against Dylan Lee. And they went down meekly. In 6 of 9 innings, they went down meekly. They were in that game despite Paul Blackburn struggling in the first few innings. Like, all of that combined together with the fact that this offense has sucked for a week and a half, and I'm not sure it's going to turn around tomorrow, has me raising the hazard flag to a yellow.
Right.
I'm a little concerned.
Well, it's easy to be concerned, and the one thing that made so much sense is finally you see a manager publicly criticize his team. And he talked about Carlos Mendoza, and you rarely see this. You will never see Aaron Boone do this. We have not, at least in his tenure here as the manager. Maybe privately, he will chastise someone here or there for whatever it is they're doing. I guess maybe with Glaber we saw it a little bit, and that was just by benching him. But when Carlos Mendoza, speaking to the media, basically tells guys they got to get their heads out of their butts, right? That's putting your team on blast. And so if that's what he said publicly, you know that it's a lot more terse internally. And so the only problem with doing that, and I love that he did it, but the only problem with doing it this early in the season, we're not at the All-Star break yet, is what happens if nothing happens.
And
what happens if it just stays the same and they don't respond to you?
Teak, here's the biggest problem I kind of have with this Met offense, to your point of why it may not turn around.
Yeah.
As much as I want to think it's just a slow stretch. Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, and Alonso are fine. Now, I know Pete has struggled over this 10-game stretch. He has.
Yep.
He was due to struggle since he got off to a great start. But it's really everybody else I look at, and I wonder, is that turnaround coming? Like, we know Lindor is streaky. We know Pete Alonso is streaky. We know Brandon Nimmo is streaky. And obviously Juan Soto is going through a good streak right now. Those 4 guys are pretty reliable, even if you want to rip them for an 0 for 4 last night with Pete or Francisco Lindor going 0 for Atlanta. Like, those guys will be fine. And that doesn't concern me. But what concerns me is Luis Torrens is the everyday catcher. Brett Beatty is playing every day, and since this stretch began, he's hitting 167. Ronnie Mauricio is about to be sent down during this stretch, is hitting 154. Tyrone Taylor, who's a wonderful defensive player during this stretch, is hitting 167. Jared Young, who's not a major leaguer, I don't know why he's here, is hitting 118 over that stretch. And I don't know if all of that's going to change. Like, the bottom half of this order from 5 through 9 features a bunch of guys who don't have a track record. And so I can confidently tell you, Pete's struggling. He'll be fine. And you know what backs me up on that? His resume and his history and the year he's had. Same thing with Lindor. Same thing with Brandon Nimmo. To a degree, I could say about it at Jeff McNeil, but he's been so inconsistent the last few years, I don't have that same confidence. It's everybody else. And as I'm sitting there at Citi Field last night watching this offense struggle to score, I'm looking at the bottom half of the lineup, which has been abysmal. And it's not just the anger of the now, it's the anger of what does this look like 2 weeks from now? Are we confident in the names I just mentioned turning things around? And the biggest wild card is Mark Vientos.
Right.
Like, they need him to walk through that door and be the guy he was last year.
Yeah,
but if that doesn't happen, then Carlos Mendoza could say whatever he wants after games. He could call people out all he wants. We could sit here bitching about Soto and Alonso and Lindor all we want. There are only 4 guys in a 9-man lineup. And the 5 other spots, and I just went through the names, they don't have the track record of turning things around, which is why my flag has been raised.
Yeah.
From, it's okay, it's the ebbs and flows of a season, to, wait a second, maybe they're not as good as I thought.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it feels that way because the Braves aren't, or at least haven't been that good, except for when they're playing the New York Mets. And now they're, 10 games behind the Mets and 9 or so, whatever they
9 behind the Mets.
9 behind the Mets, 10 out of the top seed or the top in the NL East. And so part of this is what we feared before the first series with the Braves. That is, the Braves are your kryptonite, and you're allowing them to get back into the division race. You're jump-starting them because you're scared of them. And I wonder if that's I can't believe that is a player thing. That's got to be just a fan thing. The fans don't believe that the Mets can beat the Braves, and so there are kryptonite, just like the Houston Astros were the Yankees' kryptonite for all those years. But why does that permeate itself into the clubhouse of the New York Mets?
I don't think that's it.
I don't think it is either. But why is it this way?
They've struggled.
Why is it the Braves, who were, don't forget, 2 weeks ago, 15 games out?
Well, the answer to that is I think they're playing the Braves at a time in the season in which they're struggling. The Mets, that is, because they didn't hit in Philly either outside of the breakout on Saturday, and they struggled against Tampa Bay too.
Yeah,
I think it's just the inconvenience of playing the Braves at this time. I don't think that last night at Citi Field, the Mets wilted at the Braves logo. I don't think that's what it is. I think this is just an offense, and maybe this is my comeuppance as a Met fan who's having to realize that this lineup is not as good as I thought it was. And the reason it's not as good as I thought it was because Mark Vientos was a complete zero, who's now injured. Yep. He'll be back in a few days, and the rest of the lineup, whether it's Torrens or Beatty or Mauricio or Taylor.
So we know what the issue is, so what's the solution?
Unfortunately, there is no solution right now. Right now, on June 24th, there is no solution. I'm telling you what I think the problem is and why my yellow flag has been raised. But you're not making a big trade on June 24th. We can start talking about trades, and there will be ones to be made in a month, but it's not happening today. And they've tried giving young guys an opportunity. Brett Beatty's failed. Ronnie Mauricio's failed. It doesn't mean I'm giving up on Ronnie Mauricio, but in terms of the right now, he's failed. His chase rate is ridiculous. Like, Mark Vientos has to come back and be a superhero. So when you ask me, all right, Evan, you're bitching, you're whining, the bottom of the order stinks. Sure, you're right. What are you going to do? Right now, the only thing you can do is hope that Mark Vientos walks through that door and is the guy he was a year ago. Because I don't expect Luis Torrens, who's a fine fielder, to all of a sudden hit 350. I just don't. I mean, why would we expect that?
Right. But so the question then becomes, if Mark Vientos isn't that, what does Carlos Mendoza do? Because at this point in the season, or these lulls in any season, and really any sport, it becomes the head coach's or the manager's job to make something happen. The question is, how do you do that?
I don't think there's really much you can do. I mean, you could shake the lineup up as much as you want. Right now, they've got basically 44% of this lineup is either a major question or a zero.
Yeah.
Like Tyrone Taylor and Luis Torrens are defensive first players. We know it. They have a track record. They may get hot for a week or two, but their records are what their records are. And the young guys that they have given opportunities to have failed. And that's why I'm getting nervous. And so, really, what's the solution? The solution is they got to survive this stretch until either Mark Vientos comes back and is Superman, or until there are able bodies they could acquire at the trade deadline, which, unfortunately, is still over a month away.
Yeah, but think about what you're saying. Mark Vientos played 50 or so games before he got hurt, and he was hitting 230.
I understand.
So it's almost an unrealistic cape that you're asking him to wear.
He did have a very good year last year. He also hit big home runs in the postseason.
Of course he did.
I think that's a more realistic cape than asking Tyrone Taylor to all of a sudden become an offensive force. He's not. His entire career has shown you that. I think it's more realistic than expecting Ronnie Mauricio, who missed an entire year last year, to all of a sudden hit like it's AAA.
Yeah.
So while it may not be realistic to you, it's certainly more realistic than the other options they have right now.
But it also feels desperate. It also feels like you're asking a young player who's only 25 years old to step back into the lineup and be a hero. And I don't know if that's suited for him. If he comes and does it, fantastic. He'll be lauded. We'll talk about him and give him all kinds of kudos and praise. But it's unrealistic that that's going to happen because he wasn't that before he got hurt this year. Mm-hmm. And so I think the challenge for the Mets, forget the Met fan for a second, the challenge for the Mets is that they're pressing. Like, they know that they're a good team, but they're pressing because they think they're supposed to be great. And so instead of doing the average things really well, Francisco Alvarez, before he got sit down, just ball gets in the dirt, stop it, right? Don't let it go under your glove and get to the backstop and give up a run. It's little things. Francisco Lindor. I mean, how many times? Double clutch the other day. Was that yesterday? I think it was yesterday. Double clutch when whoever was rounding second, and he kind of just be decisive. Right? It's little things that ultimately have cost this Met team in close games, wins and losses.
But you know why those little things are even more important? Because they're not hitting. They're not scoring runs. It's unrealistic to win games the way they did the first 2 months of the year where their pitching was outstanding. Like, yesterday was such a weird
case. But if that's who you are, that's just who you are.
What do you mean?
Meaning if we kind of got a little bit, I don't know, hefty or fat off of winning games weekly and meekly. It's not like they were scoring 10 runs.
No, they weren't. They were never the offense we expected them to be, but there was a hope that eventually they would turn into that. And if anything, it's gone backwards. They're scoring fewer runs now than they did over the first few months of the year where they were winning games.
Yeah, so now it was all on pitching because top ERA, starting ERA in baseball, one of the best team ERAs in baseball. Your bullpen, which had been sketchy a year ago, was actually really good. Edwin Diaz is back to being Edwin Diaz. Like, all of these things were the MO for winning, and you expected the bats to come along, but it doesn't seem like they're destined to come along.
Well, they've also gotten worse.
Well, they've
Forget
gotten
about
worse.
come along. Like, I expected them to come along during this 10-game stretch. They're far worse. Well, if you take away the outburst on Saturday against the Phillies, they're scoring 2 runs a game.
I agree, but you expected to get better with players who aren't proven commodities.
You know why I expected them to get better? I feel like I have to defend myself.
Because they're young and up and coming, because they were prospects that you have high hopes for.
Not just prospects.
They've shown flashes, all these other things.
Well, no, not just that. Mark Vientos had a really good year last year.
Of course he did, but he had a really bad start to the season.
No, I know that, but I'm explaining why I thought this offense would come along. Obviously, it didn't happen.
Right.
It hasn't happened to the point where I'm looking at this lineup wondering if it's ever going to happen, but I'm at least explaining it wasn't like pulled out of one's ass. Like, Mark Vientos had a really good year last year. Who sat here and thought he was going to struggle the way he did? Did you? I didn't hear you say that. Don't say it now on June 24th.
I did say you're going to need another bat.
Well, you did say that.
And the reason was because,
well, that you're right about.
Look, this is different than my hate of rookies in the NFL because they just don't get it. Like, they don't understand the physicality and the grind of playing 17 weeks in the NFL, now 18 weeks in the NFL. So you know why I hate rookies.
Yeah.
But in baseball, it's different because the process of getting there is much more extended. So you should have a little bit of an awareness about the daily grind that it is to be a Major League Baseball player. But until you see it, until you experience it, not just for a season or half of a season like Mark Vientos, but for the entirety of a year, and you start to say, you know what, I can trust that kid. I just don't trust those kids.
No, you're right.
And then at the same time, you get some of these older players just not aging out, but just becoming a little bit less reliable.
But there's a difference between Vientos taking a step back, which I did honestly expect, versus Vientos falling off a cliff and then being on the injured list. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a far fall off. And I remember saying this back in March about both the Mets and the Yankees, which was, hey, when you think back to 2024 and why they had success, a big part of why they had success is there were young players who stepped up in a big way.
100%.
In the Yankees' case, it was Austin Wells and Luis Gil. And in the Mets' case, it wasn't just a veteran like Iglesias having a great year. It was Mark Vientos.
Right.
Well, as we sit here in late June of 2025, specifically looking at the New York Mets, they have gotten nothing out of their young players. And that is a massive disappointment. It starts with Vientos going backwards. It continues with Beatty, who gives us a little bit of a sign of life, but mostly has underperformed. It continues with Ronnie Mauricio, has done nothing. It continued before that with Luis Angel Acuna, who, when given the opportunity, didn't hit. They have gotten nothing out of their young players.
Yeah, Alvarez, too, you didn't mention.
Thank you. That's a big one. In fact, that may be the biggest one.
Of course it is.
Francisco Alvarez.
You thought he was a cog.
You're right. So when you add all that together, is we diagnose why this offense hasn't been what I thought, maybe some Met fans thought, that's your answer. But now that we've diagnosed it, you sit here on June 24th and say, okay, how's it going to change? Because the one thing that's tough to rely on is winning games 3-2 and 4-3. Because while the pitching can stabilize, and I think it will, with Sean Manaea coming back, and we'll see about Frankie Montas tonight, it's tough to pitch to the level they pitched over the first few months of the season. So they have to hit. And here's the thing about the big four. Because I heard Sal earlier, and he even said it to me as we were coming on the air. He's like, oh, you're going to kill your boy Pete? Look, Pete Alonso hasn't hit. If you want me to kill him by saying over this 10-game stretch, he's hitting .205 with a home run and a .570 OPS, I'll do it. Those are the numbers, and those numbers suck. And last night he was 0 for 4. But it's unrealistic to have expected Pete or anybody to carry the offense all year. He had a great start to the year. He is struggling now in June. Will he eventually have to heat up? Absolutely.
Right.
But right now, it's also the fact that 5 through 9 does nothing. That's a big part of it. So I understand that there are going to be ebbs and flows of a season where Alonso struggles, where Lindor struggles. Lindor did nothing in Atlanta. He went 0 for 11. But I also have to, and we all have to understand that even the best players are going to go through rough stretches. That's the ebbs and flows of a season. But you have to overcome it with other guys stepping up. And over that same stretch where Pete has done nothing and the Mets have gone 1-9, I just gave you the numbers of 5 through 9. McNeil, 152. Terrence, 158. Beatty, 167. Mauricio, 154. Taylor, 167. Jared Young, 118. Bro.
It's almost, it's unfathomable.
That's unfathomable. So, yes, I'd love for Pete to get hot again, and they're going to need him to get hot again.
They
need Lindor to get hot again, of course. But they need some guys outside of the front four to perform.
Right. It doesn't matter. Even if those guys are performing, they can't do it on their own. It is ultimately a team sport. And while I realized it was bad, I didn't realize it was that bad.
You like those numbers?
No, I hate those numbers.
Well, you hate those numbers, but you like that I supplied them for you, right?
Yes.
The only guy, and these are the numbers through the 10-game stretch where they're 1-9. There are really 3 players in this lineup that are performing. Number 1 is Juan Soto. And here's the juxtaposition we have with Juan Soto. Juan Soto hit a home run that brought the Mets off their death mat last night. And then, yes, when he comes up in the 8th inning with 2 on and 2 out, I believed in my stomach this is his moment. I did. I wasn't negative, Evan. I was positive, Tommy. I believed that Juan Soto was going to bank a 3-run home run off a sign in deep right field. And he struck out.
Right.
And I can't kill him for it because that's baseball. And Dylan Lee threw a hell of a 3-2 slider, and Juan Soto over this stretch has a 1,000 OPS. So it would be unrealistic and unfair for me to just bash Juan Soto. But the only guys who are hitting are Juan Soto, Brandon Nimmo, and a little bit of Starling Marte. Outside of that, nobody's hitting. And some of it, like Lindor and Alonso, are the ebbs and flows of the season. But 5 through 9, I don't know how that's going to change. And that's why my hazard flag is at yellow, which means it's not full-blown panic, even if my voice sounds like it's shaking right now. It's a yellow, uh-oh. It's a yellow, uh-oh.
Something's not quite right.
Where's your flag?
For the Mets?
Are you at red?
Of course I'm at red. They've lost 9 of 10.
You're at red?
9 of 10, and they're getting punked by the Braves. Again, this feels like a story that we were telling 3 years ago that you were supposed to be past after you get to the NLCS and your team is remade and Steve Cohen takes on a different mentality as opposed to going and getting these old starters to try to just power you through and get that elusive championship. It's a different mentality. It's a different president and David Stearns. And yet the same you-know-what is happening. So, yes, I'm on a red if I was a Met fan.
You're at a red.
You have to be. You've lost 9 out of 10.
I'm at a yellow. Yeah, I thought I'm being realistic. I thought I'm being calm.
You are being realistic, but I think the reality is it's much more red than it is yellow.
You think Tommy's going to surprise us and be at red right now?
No, Tommy's positive, Tommy. Negative Tommy's dead.
Okay.
Well, except for in Bad Tiki's world. But Negative Tommy's dead.
So that means you're not even at a yellow flag, Tommy. You're at a green, calm, the waters are perfect. Jump on in.
There are no sharks. There aren't even any jellyfish in the water. Feel free to run in there. There are no hazard flags up at my beach.
I kind of hate both of you right now.
Why?
Because
We're at the extremes.
Yeah, like
and you're being reasonable and you hate being reasonable.
I'm the reasonable Met fan. I'm the regular Joe who's sitting here saying, hey, here's what I'm concerned about. I'm not fully panicking. And I got the two devils on my shoulder.
Look, you know what did it for me?
What?
Carlos Mendoza.
Why? Because he called guys out?
Yes, because you don't do that. You don't do that.
Nah, but he's always been honest. He's honest about what's going on.
He's been honest, but you don't do that. We're not at the All-Star break, Evan, and he's calling his guys out. Now, what happens if they don't respond? What are you going to call them out again?
Yeah.
You already did that. Didn't work the first time. Why do you think it's going to work the second time?
If they don't respond, then the season's going to spiral out of control.
Exactly.
Because then a 10-game stretch turns into a 20-game stretch.
You've set up the spiral. That's the problem. You've already set up the spiral.
I don't know if I agree with that.
We'll see.
But I don't like the fact that I got the two devils on my shoulder. I got Tiki, who I think is ultra red and negative right now. Like, the sky's about to fall. And then I got Tommy, who's like, nothing to see here. He's like Baghdad Bob. Like, what are you talking about? We didn't get bombed.
Well,
there may be fire behind me, but you don't see that, do you?
We don't have to break down every single loss, but let's just go with last night. Schmackabacher always pitches well against the Mets.
What'd you call him?
Schmackalacher. He pitches 7 innings against the Mets every single time, so you go into those games knowing he's going to bring it. Acuna is the best player in baseball right now. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you got to look over at the other side and go, the Braves' record is misleading.
Stop right there. Here's where I disagree with you, okay? Where I'm going to give you a little bit in this, and then I'm going to fight you. Okay. Not fight you as a friend. Paul Blackburn last night puts the leadoff man on in the first inning, the leadoff man on in the second inning, the leadoff man in the third inning, and somehow escapes with a 4 2/3 3-run performance. Not good, but also not a disaster, right? And the Met bullpen somehow does a great job making the big pitch when they have to keep them in the game. Soto, one big swing, despite doing nothing against Schwellenbach. They're in the game 3-2, and they've got...
that's how you say his name.
Schwellenbach, yes.
Okay,
I needed to at least say it right. So now you've got Schwellenbach out of the game, and you've got your guys up, top of the order, against Raisel Iglesias, who lost his closer's job with a 6 ERA, and then eventually Dylan Lee. You're in the Brave bullpen. One guy who lost his closer's job, and another guy in Dylan Lee, who we're not confusing with Billy Wagner in his prime.
Nobody's pitched
Right.
great.
So it's sub 2 ERA, though.
He's been fine.
Right.
I get it. In that spot, you win the game. Like, I get the Blackburn stuff. I get the Schwellenbach stuff. In the 8th inning on, like, the 9th inning actually bothered me more than the 8th inning. Soto strikes out. Okay, he's human. How about in the 9th inning against Dylan Lee, you have Pete Alonso, who looked like he had never seen a slider before, striking out on 4 pitches. You had Jeff McNeil attacking the first pitch. Did I hate that? Maybe. I just won't admit that right now.
Sean.
And then you had Tyrone Taylor grounded out. Like, that moment, the last 2 innings of this game, don't give me Schwellenbach, don't give me Blackburn. Win the game in your own building.
Right, and it's what they did a year ago.
Yes. Spin that, Johnny.
I'll give you the positive Tommy spin. At this point last season, what was the Mets'
Don't do
biggest...
that.
I don't even want to say it in light of all the injuries.
Don't
What was
do
their
that.
biggest issue last year, the Mets?
The biggest, I don't remember.
bullpen.
It was the bullpen. Thank you, Tiki. And I would say at this point, the biggest issue for the Mets is hitting with runners in scoring position. Positive Tommy believes that's going to turn.
Okay, but here's the problem.
They are going to
Here's
start
the
getting
problem.
the big hits.
Here's the problem. I said that all year. All year I said, hey, you keep getting traffic on the base paths.
Right.
Eventually you will come through. Even the Yankees, when we get to them later, the Yankees were 0 for 12 last night. If you continue to give yourself opportunities, you will come through. You know how many runners in scoring position opportunities the Mets have had the last 2 games? 4. In the last 2 games. The problem hasn't been just lack of clutch hitting. The problem is they're not hitting. And 5 through 9, I don't know how that's changing in a dramatic way. That's what's deeply concerning, or at least yellow flag concerning about this offense.
You have to, if you're David Stearns, you have to see if any one of these kids are going to hit, whether it's going to be Beatty, if you bring Alvarez back up, Mauricio, Vientos when he gets back. And if they don't, guess what? You got to make trades, right? Don't you have to bring in veteran bats? Don't you have to give depth to this lineup? You have about a month before the deadline. So I feel like you have 2 bites at the apple there. Either 1, 2, 3 of these kids are going to start to hit, or you have to start making moves because this team is a playoff team. They have to be aggressive if they're not getting hits from the bottom of the order.
We'll get to your calls coming up. I am at the yellow flag of my concern is rising.